Welcome to DVC Alumni, where every story inspires the next. The official podcast of the Diablo Valley College Alumni Association. As we celebrate 75 years of DVC's impact on education, careers, and community, we're honored to share the incredible journeys of alumni who've transformed their time on our vibrant campus into meaningful careers, community contributions, and personal success. Each Tuesday, we spotlight DVC alumni, from first-generation graduates to entrepreneurs, educators, and leaders who share the triumphs, challenges, and pivotal moments that shaped their lives. And on Thursdays, it's Resource Thursday. We dive into the programs, departments, and services that make DVC the supportive, dynamic community it is, exploring how they serve students and how you can connect with them. Whether you're a current student, recent graduate, or longtime alum, join us as we honor DVC's legacy and discover how our past continues to inspire the future. Thank you for being part of this journey. Be sure to tune in, subscribe, and celebrate with us. DVC Alumni, where every story inspires the next. And now, join our host, Alumni Manager, Charlie Daly.
And we are live. So let's go ahead and start by having you introduce yourself.
Well, hello. My name is Allyson Troxel-Galang, and my title would be Dr. Troxel-Galang, just so you know, but you can call me Allyson. Thank you.
Well, terrific. And I think as we were sharing before we started, I just kind of I found you on LinkedIn and just started looking at where you've been and the stuff you got going, and have just found it absolutely fascinating. And so why don't we start with, and I feel like I should be promoting your book, and if you don't have one yet, come back when you do.
Okay, I don't. And I don't have aspirations to be a writer per se, but maybe, you never know.
You never know.
Close the door to that, right?
Yeah, so you start off, where did you grow up originally?
Yeah, thanks. I actually grew up in Missouri. I mean, I'm originally born in Illinois, so I'm a Midwestern gal. And I transplanted to California in 1998. I was a senior in high school. So I moved to Concord. So very local to DVC. And yeah, that's certainly part of how I ended up at DVC, but like part of just even the experience of moving your senior year. I was not what you'd call a college-bound kid, and that didn't help my motivation. So,
Okay.
to say the least.
What high school did you go to?
Concord High. I graduated in class of 99.
Okay. I've got several friends that have their kids going there. I went to UC Valley, class of 79, so I'm a hiccup behind you or ahead of you. So
just a smidge ahead.
Yeah. So great. So what was the process of getting you to DVC, and what did that look like? Because it was certainly different than it is now.
Yeah, I would imagine. So as I noted, I really was not a college-bound kid. I wasn't terrible at school. I didn't hate school, but I didn't love school, and I didn't, necessarily excel. My senior year, I didn't apply to any colleges. I didn't have a path. I had other interests. I had a great job at IHOP. I thought, this is what I could do. I was a social gal, and I came from a family where working class, right? Like education was not highly valued. In fact, we got to California because my mom was in the Army and she was transferred. She was actually stationed in Oakland, but we lived in military housing over there near Pixie Playland Park. And yeah, it was kind of interesting. Like my family gave me these messages like, yo, it's great. You know what you want to do. You don't need to go waste your time and money and go to college and do all that stuff. And I bought those messages. I thought, yeah, it's pretty great. And the only reason I even considered DVC at that point in my life, was after I turned 18, the deal was I had to pay rent or be going to school.
Okay.
That that was enough to say like, well, let me explore school. And I did promptly enroll in DVC, and at that point, I think it was like $12 credit for
Mhm.
classes. I don't know that that's today's cost. I would imagine it's shifted. That's
It's a bit more, but not by much.
yeah. It's been, a good 20 plus years, right? Um, and so I took a lot of art classes and a couple 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 of my, transfer credits like CE, I forget what they're called, general education,
Mhm.
you know, for the CSU or Cal Systems. I took a couple of those. I was aware of that pathway and it was a place, it was something that people talked about. And I had some ideas. I wanted to be kindergarten teacher. So I was looking into
Oh,
the early childhood education classes at that point. And even back then, I remember DVC having a good program around that and, having like on-site childcare. And I loved it. And I actually ended up getting a job at a fine arts preschool in Walnut Creek for a couple of years, worked there, um, which was pretty cool. Pretty good experience. Also helped me learn I didn't want to do that work. It wasn't the right place for me actually. Because I do love children and I'd like to keep it that way. You know?
you're like, yeah. Well, and it's I think it is one of those things where it's good to find that out early on before you
Yeah.
get too far down that path. I know when my youngest one was going to school, she changed her major several times. And a friend of mine, I was like kind of irritated by it. And a friend of mine told me, no, no, that means the education process is working because they get exposed to new ideas and stuff like that. So you went from I'm gonna, watch kids forever, early childhood development, all that stuff, and all of a sudden you're like, yeah, not so much.
Totally. And I mean, there were some extenuating circumstances in my life at that time that, life was getting really hard. As someone who didn't have a clear path, I had, less and less support in terms of my family. My mom got restationed back to the Midwest. And so, I was really trying to figure out what I was doing. I was working restaurant jobs and I had that preschool job. And, as much as I loved it, I didn't have I think a solid self concept, like I really just didn't have a clear like this is where I'm going to land. And I had a lot of dark times at that point, like where I couldn't do school, I really couldn't keep jobs that well. I actually lost a lot of jobs, and I was like I said doing a lot of restaurant jobs, so there was abundance of other things. So it was kind of hard to even see that I wasn't on the
Mhm.
like real great path, but I was becoming aware of that. And I don't know how much you're okay with me sharing, and we didn't talk about this, but like I actually went to jail for a while. Like
Oh wow.
yeah, I had some significant substance use issues, and
Hmm.
like it was pretty dark time. So like school was not not the focus at that point. um, and I think you probably see how if you pull my transcripts from those early years, like, it's 2000, like you see a bunch of F's and W's, right? I was not ready. And, I did enjoy the classes when I took them, like certainly loved that there was so much available, but I had to work some things out. And,
Hmm.
luckily I was able to do that. And I floated a little bit for a few years. And then, I came back to DVC and somewhere around, I want to say 2007, maybe I don't want to say how old I was, but I was not
That you don't
college
have to
age
share
enough.
anything you don't want to, but just be very
Okay.
clear. You know,
Yeah.
but yeah,
But
and it's just
yeah.
like, well, and actually that is a story that I do hear a lot of is that,
Oh,
people came to DVC, weren't ready, had to go sort through life a little bit, and then came back when they were ready.
yeah.
And so yeah, so let's pick it up from there.
Totally. And like life had changed a lot for me. Like I got sober. And I still practice sobriety. I have almost 19 years,
Ooh, wow.
clean and
Okay.
sober. So, like it's just something that my first sponsor like literally held my hand, walked me to DVC. Said, why don't you just take a class? And I had a young child at that point, and my child was going to preschool and stuff. Like, I could take a class, and then I was able to think about what gets in my way. And at that point, like I recognized I didn't have skills to study. I really didn't know how to use a computer. Like I
Hmm.
was still the generation where I speak by high school without having a computer. I could handwrite papers and that was allowed. So I took that first kind of like reentry back. I took a computer like basic skills class. And I
Hmm.
think I just took the lab somehow without the lecture. I don't know how that worked out, but I was like, why does everyone else have all the information when they get here? But I stuck it out. And then I took this college counseling, like through the college counseling center, there was a class. I don't know exactly what it was called, but this really stood out to me. This was the best thing I ever did. They made us make a 5-year plan. They taught us just like basic skills of how to show up to school. And one of the things I took away from that class that sticks with me today was that teacher said, you know what? No matter what, if you didn't do your homework, you don't feel prepared, if you don't get it, show up. If you can show
Hmm.
up to class, you're going to do better than if you blow it off because you're feeling like uncomfortable or anxious or like not good enough, whatever it is. Right. And I was like, oh, that never occurred to me. So many
Yeah.
things I didn't finish before, like, oh, yeah, just show up. And, I learned how to tolerate being imperfect and showing up when I didn't feel prepared and showing up. And what things get worse when you don't show up. And it's not
Hmm.
necessarily always easy when you do show up, but actually that pathway was better. And, little by little, as my daughter went to school, I took a few more classes. I wrote my 5-year plan. I interviewed people doing different jobs. That was part of that college counseling class that we took. And it was really cool. Just kind of like what you're doing here, like ask them more focused on like, how'd you pick your career and what do you actually do? Just to get curious. And I thought I wanted to be an artist. Like I really thought I was going to be, a painter. And I found painters in the community and, some of them I still keep in contact with through social media and, not like we're best friends or anything, but just, got to meet people. And like I said, I worked in restaurants and I worked at a place called Hubcap's Diner in Walnut Creek. I don't know if
Oh
you're
yeah.
familiar. Yeah, I worked there 10 years. And I worked there while I was going to school. So like I would talk to people who came in regularly and ask, well, what do you do? And what else do you do? And okay, can you tell me about your job? Like they're there eating anyway. So maybe it was a little intrusive, but I did it. And, luckily, like I said, I'm not totally shy. And so, yeah, I started kind of thinking about different pathways. And, the classes I took at DVC, um, because I had to take all those general education classes, I started getting a little bit about a new story of myself, right? Because the story in my home was my sister. I had an older sister, a year older than me. She was the smart one. I was
Oh.
the social one. I was athletic. I was good with kids. Like, oh, you could work at a restaurant. You found your calling.
Yeah.
Maybe you could teach a preschool. Like not that anyone meant to be unkind or, devalue me, but I don't think there was ever a thought, hey, you're great at school. You could do this. I mean, I'll get into that later. My dad told me when I graduated with my doctoral degree, he said, when you told me you were going to do this, I didn't think you'd make it. But luckily, he didn't tell me that at the outset.
Yeah.
Um, So, this was the story started shifting. Like I took classes and I remember taking algebra and I got it. Like, and I really thought I had a learning difference. And I mean, I do have some things going on. Like I never sought out actually getting accommodations, but eventually I later got a psych eval and, it is what it is, right? I had my own
Hmm.
strategies. But my algebra teacher said, you have a proclivity for algebra. I had to look up what proclivity meant, but I definitely heard that. Like no one had ever told me that. Like you're good at this, right? Like you could do this. You could think this way. And I love statistics even. I mean, I just showed up and I did the stuff and I, would take the next class and figure out and I'd be reading to my daughter when I put her to sleep, reading from, the first class I'm taking. Sorry, you know, just trying to kind of make it work. And um yeah, it definitely shifted my thinking, like, "Okay, I love art still, but I know that it's not exactly the right path," and I still have this idea of, like, I like to teach, and I don't know if I wanna be a teacher, and I explored that option, and I got interested in psychology. Actually took abnormal psych, and it was one of the most interesting classes I took there. And I remember the professor talking about the pathway to becoming a psychologist, and I was like, 7 more years of school?
Wow.
No freaking way. You know, and I didn't really think too deeply about that much anymore. But I have said, no matter what, I'm going to transfer to a college and I'll figure it out. So I didn't have a total figured out plan, but I kept taking the classes, and eventually I got into UC Berkeley, right? I
Hmm.
actually got some good scholarships, and you know went there and really
So,
found a path.
well, yeah, and so it sounds like you really went through the path of you basically stuck your toe in all the different waters to find stuff, and what you thought it was going to be when you started ended up not being it, as it developed.
Little bit. I mean, I think I kept close to the art department still, though. Even that second
Mhm.
iteration, I took a lot of painting. I took printmaking, which I loved. I mean, I still took advantage of the fact that it was there. I took art history, which I thought was some of the harder classes I took in terms of the demands of the learning and writing papers. But I was really appreciative that I got to kind of feel that out, and I got interested. Yeah, I kind of just got interested in something bigger, but I it did, um, yeah, try different things out, but I really at DVC did try to stick to the, like, transferring path,
Mhm.
right? Which I thought that's helpful to me. Another thing I think was so important that I remember about my time at DVC is I really, really used the resources. Like, I remember there being a math center because, like I said, my story and
Still is.
yeah, I I I needed help, and, I think what had shifted was I wasn't scared to ask for help or embarrassed or, above it or any of those kind of things. Like, I really
Mhm.
tried to use all the resources that were there, so I could explore those things. So, like,
Mhm.
yeah, when I was taking those early childhood education classes, I worked, some shifts in the childcare center there too, like, really trying to, like you said, get your toes in the water, um,
Mhm.
in different ways, right? Through talking to people, through the classes I took, really just trying to see what else was there because I recognized how limited my thinking had been,
Mhm.
what was
So,
possible.
right, and that's the thing I think that we see a lot of times when people go to school is,
Mhm.
to college, is they suddenly go, oh my goodness, the world is so big,
Yeah,
and before they just thought it was their own block.
totally.
Uh, so you started charting a different path. You went from I'm going to be an artist because that seemed like a well, and it could have been. Who knows? But it just
I don't know if I
and
have a proclivity for painting. I mean, I have creative juice and I have some skill sets, but I'm not, it's probably not where I'm going to end up, but that's okay.
well, yeah, and it's just like if nothing else, you developed a greater love for it.
Totally.
But you went from the artist thing to statistics, which that's a very interesting line. And because I'm kind of a data geek, it's like it's just like, ooh, that sounds interesting. But you go from
Right.
there to there, and then you end up but you're still doing the transfer thing, but you're interested in psychology, and you end up at UC Berkeley.
Yes.
Let's
Yeah,
talk about that a little bit, because I know from
sure.
UC Berkeley to the Wright Institute, which is, certainly not a small dot on the map of things in the world.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, I mean, again, I think DVC really prepared me for the transition well, right?
Mhm.
Like, I can't even imagine having gone to that school as an 18-year-old. Like, I don't really know how people actually do that, and I'm so impressed when I hear people with a more traditional journey. I don't get it. Like, there's no way, right? And the application process was hard because, like I said, I hadn't applied to college. Like, I had
Mhm.
gone to DVC, it was the only school I knew. So, like, even there, and um, I also applied to San Francisco State, and they accepted me as well. And there, I got accepted as a psychology major. I'm trying to remember with UC Berkeley. I actually went there. I mean, it was UC Berkeley. There's
Yeah.
some prestige, but also because of the scholarships I got. offered were so good. I had a really good GPA, actually. Like, my grades were great,
Hmm.
and some of that was strategic. Like, I took less classes and built up, as my time shifted. Um, but even at UC Berkeley, I knew how to seek out resources too, right? Like, to get support I needed. They have a really excellent, excellent, excellent. I cannot speak enough about their program for student parents and for reentry students. So reentry students, I'm sure but in case anyone else
Hmm.
out there doesn't, is like folks who are a little older, start coming back to college. And I think
Yes.
at that point I was like 30, you know. Um, so I felt a little older, you know. Um, and I took those classes too, which, was really amazing. And I was glad I didn't want to be an artist anymore. And, I looked at those requirements. I'm like, if art history classes were really hard at DVC, how hard is it going to be at UC Berkeley? And I probably would have been fine at there. But I actually got to do something so cool there. I was an interdisciplinary studies field major, which is a whole mouthful. And what that means is you chart your own course
Oh.
for your undergraduate study from within liberal arts. You make up your own degree, essentially, and
Hmm.
pathway. And I felt like I could do that, and so my major ended up being health and human consciousness, right? Whatever that means. And you have to write an undergraduate thesis. And I wrote all about, the practice of mindfulness and meditation and how that's been appropriated into therapy, and the sort of like the way that we as humans are spiritually seeking, and we appropriate, science in the space of religion. I just got into stuff I was interested in at that point. And how lucky was I? I didn't have to fight the battle to get into psych classes. I got to take classes from, like religion studies, and like I learned a lot about Buddhism. I took some art classes. There was actually a class at Cal, art and meditation. Like, who knew?
Okay.
And art and healing. So I took those classes. Those are only art classes I took there. I took a lot of sociology classes. And again, I learned how to be strategic from DVC. So, like, I took my PE for pass fail.
Okay.
I didn't get hurt. I took Taekwondo of all things. I loved it, you know. But again, it was that same sort of spirit of I get to be here. And I think that's also what I was prepared for. Like, I get to be here and do the thing, and I'm going to take full advantage of all that's in front of me, not in a like taking advantage way, but like I
Well,
want to
you
enjoy this,
you
and
want to experience
grow.
all the opportunities and resources that you have a
Yes.
chance to. And I do think that I think the word advantage does, and I know what you meant, because too often we go, hey, I wanted to take advantage, and that sometimes has a very negative connotation. But
Right.
when you have an opportunity and all these things presented to you, you would want to take advantage of as many as you possibly could. So,
Yeah. Exactly. And I mean, I think that's like if I had a theme, about the education journey I've been on, it's like opportunity. Like, I learned how to appreciate the opportunities. You know
mhm.
what I mean? And um this is a little bit of a tangent, but my daughter's now 20, almost 21. I'm like, can't even believe it. And I'm trying to get her to go to DVC. Like, she actually got like really great scholarships over at St. Mary's, which I didn't see coming.
Okay.
After the pandemic, this kid was on fire and applying and advocating and doing her things. And, but then she burnt out when she went to the traditional college experience, and, didn't, didn't stick, didn't stick. But, I've been telling her about DVC, and she just had a friend transfer from DVC to Cal that
Oh.
she's really proud of. And so, like, I just, it amazes me. It's like that is still there as an opportunity. So I really do hope people are aware of like how lucky we are to have this system in place.
Well, my daughter, who graduated here a while ago, and she went to Berkeley, and she's a PE teacher.
Oh,
She's been one
cool.
for some time. She's about to turn 40. So yeah. So
Wow.
and I'm looking at taking the couple classes in the spring, just because I work here and it's like the commute's great. So So you
Perfect.
went to Berkeley. I want to get to some of this stuff because I'm kind of
Okay.
like, again, I'm looking at your resume, all the amazing things you did, and I think it's and I'm sorry, it's like I'm just like going, oh my God. Um, so and you still have Hubcap's Diner on here, which I think is terrific. I mean, in a lot of
Yes,
ways it is because this is a big part of your story, obviously.
100%. I loved
Um,
working there. I mean, I was there on the last day Hubcaps
oh,
was in operation. So I
yeah,
worked there until my second year in grad school, actually. And I ended up having another baby when I was in my last semester at Cal and graduated in December. So because I was being strategic, I actually took some lessened class loads, but I left Cal with a 3.9 GPA. Like
wow,
I was on Dean's list. I was only on Dean's list once because you can only be on the Dean's list if you have a full class load of academic
right.
credits. Um, but yeah, I did it, and I wrote my thesis and had a baby and worked at the diner on the weekends, and like life was good. And I was trying to kind of back out of some of that because I was thinking about grad school, and I applied it, to the Wright Institute and then JFK, which is now I think national.
Gone.
Yeah, it's just
Well,
changed.
it became national, and then I didn't take any class over there, but I knew a lot of people that worked over there and had great respect for them. But yeah, it's gone,
Yeah,
which
it's
is
so
too
sad.
bad.
Yeah, it is too
So
bad.
you ended up going to the Wright Institute, and by the way, I think everybody should work in food service or customer service or sales
Loved
of
it.
any sort for and have to pay their bills by doing it because the thing is, it really changes your perspective on it.
Yes.
I
It
was
would be
just
a
talking.
friendlier community, society, all of it.
It
But it had
would.
for me also at those sort of last couple years when I was in grad school and I was trying to like, okay, I got to back away I got to do less somehow. They had me just coming in Saturday night, midnight, and I just worked the graveyard shift in downtown Walnut Creek, which I don't
Yes.
know how familiar you are,
Oh,
where
I
there's
am.
a lot of
A lot of party
festivities.
people.
Yeah, a
Yes.
lot of party people. And that was great for my sobriety at a time when I was really busy. It
Yep.
reminded me I don't need to be involved in all that.
Yeah.
But also, again, it just kept me in that place. But I could. It was what worked, right?
Yeah.
So I got the honor of being there on the last ever shift. That it was January 1st of 2016. We locked it up at 3 a.m. and
Wow.
it was in.
Wow. So you go to Wright Institute, you get through that, and
Mhm.
then I'm going to kind of work through some of this stuff. And it's just so you and you're going to have to help some of us lay people because some of these things are. I mean, I'm just looking at your summary. It says skilled in mindfulness, which I get with the recovery, the Buddhism,
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
things like that, and the CBT.
Yes, that's cognitive behavioral therapy.
Okay.
So, yeah, I did a lot of I was mentored by Matt McKay, who was my advisor at the Wright Institute, and
Hmm.
I don't know if you've heard of him. He's a psychologist in the area, and he owns a publishing company, which is why he's about maybe one day I'll write a book. I don't know,
Well,
um,
see, there you go. Now you have an
maybe
in for a publisher. So.
I do, but he does a lot in that community of like self help. But he still teaches at the Wright, and
Hmm.
he opened a clinic, a nonprofit clinic called Bay Area Trauma Recovery Clinical Services.
And
The whole
them I have
mouthful.
heard of.
Matrix, yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So I actually work there now, and
Oh,
I went
cool.
there the year it opened. I was a third year in grad school, and I did my practicum training there in the first inaugural year, and now I'm a supervisor there, training
Ye-
students who are learning how to treat PTSD um, through evidence-based practice. So, like bringing in that science piece. So, cognitive behavioral therapies are really therapies supported by evidence and efficacy
Mhm.
and bring together like ways of looking at your thinking and your behaviors and the patterns of those and
Mhm.
trying to really make effective changes, right?
Okay. And so you guys also, and I'm jumping around a little bit, but just
That's
because
okay.
this is like this is, I mean, to be honest, this was like I was like, oh my God, I got to talk to her. Um, well, it's just again, it's like I think like I shared before, is like I'm kind of exploring Carl Jung, and so
Yeah.
it's I'm looking at the amount of just massive change that's occurred in everything. I mean, you even look at medical field, you pick a place. and
Yes.
just how much everything has changed. And you're treating PTSD and anxiety disorders and a variety of other things, and it's what are you finding your audience? I don't want to call it your audience. Your
Client base.
thank you. There we go. I like. What are you seeing as far as the people that are coming in? And
Oh, interesting. Like
where are they
maybe
coming from?
specify that question. Like who's coming
Well,
to
well,
therapy?
yeah, who is? Because immediately most people think of, like for instance, veterans. It's like, of
Oh,
course, is going to
okay.
be
I
it.
didn't know.
I
Okay.
start thinking things like people, for instance, that may have had traumatic incidents in their life, or maybe poor upbringings, or we'll say people in poor domestic situations, or things of that nature, or it could even be a variety of things. And I mean, is where do you see most of your client base coming from? Or
Yeah. Well, this is such an interesting question. And actually, for the last 3 years or 4 years, I've been working at Matrix as a supervisor. I've been like trying to look into our numbers and demographic data and figure out, are we
does this
serving the
does the
community?
statistician, right?
Yes,
So
exactly, exactly. So we have the most wonderful admin person in the whole wide world. He collects all sorts of data, then I can look in there and, it's great. Um, but I would say actually in terms of type of trauma, we do have some people come to us that are veterans. Um, I will say, the VA, for better or for worse, gets most of that population.
mhm.
Um, but we have some of those folks that have had military traumas, but we see a ton of sexual abuse. We see a lot of chronic early childhood type of trauma, but I would say the majority, we're seeing tons of sexual abuse. We see losses like, traumatic grief, loss of loved ones, like sudden deaths, car accidents. I mean, trauma is so much broader than I think people do think about when they hear PTSD, right? Like you said, your mind goes right to the Army veterans and the war veterans, and the reality is, honestly, we're all traumatized after the pandemic. I mean, there's a
Yes.
reality there too. And this clinic's in Berkeley. I mean, I was there as a student the year the ghost ship fire happened, and I think in the years following, we saw people that were impacted by that. We don't necessarily get involved with acute like onset, like when traumas happened immediately. We're not chasing down folks, but people find us. And we see a lot of community violence and, you know, just the reality that everything, and honestly, the way we look at it is that, yeah, there's the PTSD symptoms and the profile, right? People having intrusive thoughts, flashbacks, difficulty kind of being in the present versus like those past, you know, holding patterns, um, negative thinking and all the hyper, heightened arousal about being on guard. But that can happen from just being, invalidated,
Hmm.
being, hurt by a loved one over time. We see people, have had house fires and again, it's not always this clear cut life or death,
Hmm.
right? But it's that clear cut before and after, before this thing happened, or, before that relationship, before um, you know, again, I used to be able to be in the world this way. Now I'm here this way.
Yeah.
That kind of hallmark.
Well, and I used to work for a company um, some years ago, and they do gunfire detection in cities like Oakland and Chicago and Washington D.C. and stuff like that, San Francisco, and they've done a couple of they've helped to sponsor some studies where it basically showed that kids growing up in those neighborhoods become um, so used to the continuous violence that it affects everything with them.
Totally.
And I mean, as terrible as it sounds, I mean, it's like it would be ready made, be able to, but you'd have to start by removing those people from that environment to even
Right.
begin to
Which
try to process it.
you can't. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's a tension that we deal with in training clinicians of like there's some folks we can't help in the ways we want to, right? Like there's not a place where you get to remove all the stressors. And, this is where a lot of like our mindfulness-based interventions, I think, make profound difference. Teaching people how to reconnect or connect for the first time with a sense of their own value and
Hmm.
what's important to them, a sense of like larger connectedness, sense of purpose, right? And we do a lot. In fact, that was my dissertation work was actually at Matrix. I ran groups in a pilot study on using mindfulness interventions for post-traumatic growth, right? So
Hmm.
people who've had some treatment um, doing these mindfulness and kind of classic. I didn't write the protocol. This was from Matt McKay and Jeffrey Wood,
Right.
but I got to like run this group and it was amazing. It was so amazing to see people like really set intentions for themselves, really start to grow, write a life, mission statement. Um, and I didn't have any part of the book, but they did publish a book with all of those protocols and, like a self-help book called The New Happiness. People are interested in
Oh,
that stuff. It's out.
I'm writing it down.
The New Happiness. Yes. Um, not to shamelessly plug my mentor, but it's a great book. And again, I
Yeah.
ran it in a slightly different format for my dissertation. And what we found is actually, um, it didn't, it actually helped people who still had unprocessed trauma without even
Hmm.
like going toward the route of like having to tell your story over and over again, which is powerful, but like actually just being present in a way that embodies safety. And we know that's where the field of trauma and trauma treatment is moving. Which is why we see so much more with somatic work, and we see that. And we're at Matrix right now. We're investigating this. We're like, we need a measure for this for somatics, and how do we incorporate that in a way that's appropriate to the field of psychology? And I like the philosophical debates. Like, well, what's wrong with the field of psychology that we have to do it this way? And, I get to teach. I actually teach at the Wright Institute. In January, I'll be teaching a trauma course. So
Oh,
I'll get to
wow.
engage with students in that conversation. But at Matrix, I get to actually like say, okay, what can we do? What kind of groups can we run? What do we have evidence to show? Because we deliver evidence-based treatments, but we
Hmm.
also want to like look for, hey, we can collect evidence. We can build that too. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question about who we serve
You
and what we see.
Well, no, you kind of did. I mean, and again, it was a very open-ended question, and it kind of I mean, again, this is not a super formal. I have a check mark on everything that we're going to do, but
Right.
and truth be told, this was a part of what I wanted us to talk about. And and again, you went from you know not knowing what your life was going to be to getting yourself, and now you're running a clinic and doing clinical trials and doing and
I
really
wouldn't
on
say I wouldn't say I'm running anything, but I'm
but you are.
supervising, I'm helping students. And
Yes.
honestly, Charlie, what's so big for me is that role of mentorship.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like uh, I don't even I can't like I don't not actually the type of person. I don't want to be writing the book or running the show. Like I like being there having the brainstorm and the
Hmm.
helping them think through what is your dissertation topic going to be? Is that viable? Like can we do that? Like what do we know? Okay, well if this is a problem in the field, how are we going to shift? Like what can you do from within, What do you need to do that's radical? Like how like I love that. Like that to me is so valuable, and again, I didn't know I'd do this work. And if you'd asked 15-year-old me or 18-year-old me or even 22-year-old me, I would have said no freaking way. No freaking
Well,
way.
and that's really for me is the story of DVC is like we
Yes.
become that place, and again, it's like the thing I hear all the time is there is that mentor or there are those mentors, and
Yes.
and one they find at DVC is they learn how to use resources and ask
Mhm.
for help. One thing that there was another gentleman, Dr. Galvez. He said, use and several people have said this, where it's like you got to use office time. Go see
Yeah.
this, even if you don't need any help. Go see them.
Yep.
And just get in that
The
habit.
writing
And
center,
yep,
go. Even if you think you're good at writing, like we all have more to learn. I
yeah,
still don't think I'm great at writing, but I wrote a dissertation, and it was good
yep,
enough. And
yeah.
I definitely used as many resources as I could.
So it's that mentor like you're doing for people now, which is absolutely wonderful, and I applaud you for that. And then the other thing is learning to use the resources, and certainly that's the thing. Um, we could go on and on and on. I have like a million things going on in my head, but we'll keep this a little bit short. Not that we really have, but um, so if you were to maybe impart a couple pieces of wisdom, what do you think it would be?
To someone thinking about going to DVC or just in
Yeah,
general?
somebody thinking about DVC and in general, because I mean the thing is you bring a very specific educational skill set, because you got two things there together is certainly the education that you've gotten, and then there's also the skill set that you've developed with it, which is why you can actually practice what you've been educated at.
Yeah.
So what are the couple of things that you would want to throw out there as
Okay. Yeah, no,
guideposts?
I'm trying to inhibit right now. I'm trying to like edit. I have so many things. I mean, some of it's I've already said, like show up no matter what. I learned that and it really did change my life. Like just show up. And
Yeah.
if you're struggling, tell people. Whatever it is, if you're struggling with your academics, if you're struggling in life, you know what I mean? Like don't hide it and stick to it yourself. Like that's just not the path to overcome or to like get through, really. And yeah, I would say, like, use the resources that are available and have fun too, right? Like, there really is a reality that college is special and we can go back. Like, that's the cool thing about community college. Like, you can come back anytime. Like you said, you're going to take some classes. I constantly think, like, when am I going to have enough time where I could, like, I don't know, revisit like my love of music, and could I take a music class or who knows, right? Like, maybe I'll take a painting class again. Um, but it's there, right? But do the things that are available that you might not ever think is going to take you to a path. Like, don't just figure out, I'm going to be a nurse and then only work toward that. Like, do as much as you can, have the opportunity. That's really the wisdom I would impart. And, I will just say, like, as someone, like, I just feel like I always got to come full circle in all these journeys, and it's been super cool. I now, like, interview students when they're applying to the right institute, right? And I'm like,
Mhm.
I would have never gotten in with these questions I'm asking. Like, how, like, I just blows my mind. How did I get in? What, you know? Um, but the people that I think are the most, I don't know, sought out, like, it's not just the high GPA. It's not just you took the right classes, you had the right answers. It's like you have life, you have experience, you got a story to tell, right? Like we talked about.
Yep.
That's it. Like, do it, like, get out there and live and, don't just follow a straight path.
All righty. Well, we will end the recording at that point, and I appreciate your time and thank you.
Yes, you're
And
welcome.
yeah.
Thank you for tuning in to DVC Alumni, where every story inspires the next, the official podcast of the Diablo Valley College Alumni Association, celebrating 75 years of DVC's incredible impact on education, careers, and community. We hope today's episode gave you valuable insights into the journeys of our alumni and the powerful resources available at DVC. Don't forget to join us every Tuesday for inspiring alumni stories, and on Resource Thursdays, where we spotlight DVC's departments and services, showing you how they're shaping student success. Until next time, keep pushing boundaries and exploring the connections that make DVC's legacy so special. And remember, DVC Alumni, where every story inspires the next.